Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leader Generation brought to you by ModUp. I'm your host, Tessa Burg, and today I'm joined by John Powers. He has recently joined ModUp as an executive of residence. He spent the last 30 years as an executive at Deloitte, of all places, leading digital transformation and serving as the CIO. We're so excited to have you on the show today, John, and welcome to ModUp.
Tess, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
So I was telling you before we got on that I was checking out your LinkedIn profile. Super impressive, and I am very curious. What brought you to ModUp? Like how did you come here? And before we get into all the things about digital transformation, the next wave, and all that tech, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you here to ModUp.
So let's start with what brought me to ModUp. I happened to be doing work with ModUp, and the work was when as CIO at Deloitte, there were a series of programs that I needed to educate the organization about and try to drive change. I was also the chief transformation officer, so it was combo. And I happened to be friends with Len Gilbert, who is a senior leader now at ModUp, and was then as well. And he and I just happened to be discussing the problem that I had. And he happened to mention this is something that he and ModUp did as a scope of work. And that was really intriguing to me because while I could have used internal Deloitte resources for the job, frankly, this was a big change to get the organization to understand. I needed an outside perspective that would, quote unquote, shake it up and
Mhm.
was not going to be bound by, hindered by, if you want to think of it, constrained by prior thinking, prior investments. And it turned out like a third party was great. Len's team was great, perfect for the job. And the senior leaders that they brought to the engagement again was one of the differences I find with ModOp and a lot of what Deloitte was doing is I would get it if I were to hire Deloitte, I would have gotten a lot of junior resources. ModOp brought senior experts, which is what we needed because the problem we had was around data strategy and data governance and the fact that we didn't have either a position that we had to be in charge of data strategy, let alone a data strategy. We had no one in charge of data governance, let alone rules, policies, et cetera. And I could see this huge clash coming with the advent of AI, and we have an enormous amount of data in a wide variety of platforms. And so we were pretty well disabled from actually taking advantage of what our our own teams wanted to do. So we were in charge of enabling the teams, and we were effectively disabling them because we didn't have essentially a data leader,
Mhm.
and we didn't have strategy or governance, and that was essentially a big issue. So I brought in the ModOp. They did the data strategy and governance work, which led to actually us putting a position in place, which is essentially the data strategy and governance leader. And that then turned into additional work with ModOp as we have expanded what the role of ModOp was doing with me and my role as CTO. And it's extended past me leaving Deloitte. ModOp is still doing work. And it has to do with the same model that ModOp brings, which is senior leaders, very nimble, very flexible, but highly expert, especially in this emerging area that I find to be really fascinating and exciting is data strategy, governance, and enablement, if you want to put it in a big bundle. And that's, to flip it around, that's why I decided to join ModUp. So as I retired from Deloitte, the opportunity came up with Len and the team. They essentially reached out to say, would you like to do more of this kind of work? And the answer was yes. And so the opportunity was there to now work on this with the same team that I had been working with on the same kind of issues that I want to work on. And that's really attractive because I wanted to focus my time and energy. As you said, I've spent 30 years at Deloitte. I spent years doing all variety of jobs, and that was great.
Mhm.
But I really wanted to focus on what I think is this really emerging opportunity. That's, of course, everyone understands how AI is an emerging opportunity. But what a lot of people don't understand is the potential for small to medium-sized businesses to really take advantage of this AI moment and punch above their weight. And a lot of people are worried about job losses. And while there will be some dislocation, there always is when there's a new technology revolution that comes through, I think small to medium businesses, it's kind of the opposite. They're actually going to be able to use these tools, AI and the like, to expand, to grow, and actually compete in places and in ways they couldn't before because it was just too much of a barrier to entry, so to speak. So the
Mhm.
scale advantages of large corporations in many respects are going to start to come down, and small to medium-sized businesses are going to be able to move up. I think that's a moment in time. I'm a big fan of that because I think that a lot of the jobs, if you want to think of it that way, a lot of the opportunity for right now, this is mostly a North America phenomenon for us in ModUp, but this is a really a moment in time for the world where you're going to see this kind of opportunity for organizations to compete in ways that have otherwise not been able, which I
Yeah.
think is exciting. And to be blunt, I want to be part of it. And ModUp is a great place to be part of it. So that was a kind of fortuitous intersection.
Yeah, I agree. I love working in that mid-market space because you can make an impact faster. But there are still some resistors who don't seem to be recognizing what these huge shifts actually mean. From your experience at Deloitte, and not only did you get to see Deloitte, but you got to see other businesses, mid-market and enterprise size, start to lean in as AI, data, and automation converge. What were those fundamental shifts that you're seeing redefine how enterprises start to organize or even have to organize in order to facilitate growth today?
So the first thing that's really interesting to me is this notion of mid-market. So when you think about mid-market, uh, you're talking about billions of dollars in revenue. So that's not small. And but people often hear mid-market. What people don't quite understand is, of course, the largest consultancies like a Deloitte or an Accenture, et cetera, are targeting the Fortune 500 because it's just efficient, just very efficient, bigger sales, bigger targets, bigger breadth. And those are in the tens to hundreds of billions kind of a situation. Um, and that's great. And that's a great use case. That's wonderfully efficient for both those organizations. But when you're talking about, and anywhere from $1 billion to $10 billion of revenue, these are really complicated, interesting companies that have great opportunity. And the way to think about this is also really quite simple, and the data continues to back it up. We did some research when I was CIO to try to understand what's the potential for AI, very broadly, but what's the potential for AI to affect what kinds of jobs? And by the way, Wharton just came out with a study that is almost completely consistent with what we found. And this is very specific to what we're doing at Deloitte. And what we found was what I think everyone is sort of figuring out is about every job we have, it has about 25% of their tasks is administrative. And that administrivia can be enabled slash made more effective if you were to really like lean into AI becoming fundamental to how do you deliver that. Let's put that aside for a second because that the lean in is the thing that hasn't even happened yet. There's these other jobs that are very deep. So it's not that where you can take almost all of the job and automate it. And we found that it's quite obvious when you looked at what we had offshored. So we offshored a bunch of work to be more efficient, as everybody did. Those tasks were, to be straightforward, very simple and commodity based, so to speak. Well, it turns out AI is exceptionally good at that kind of repetitive commodity work. So it's an opportunity to reshore. Now you can reshore whole departments, which is really an interesting dynamic. In both of these cases, though, this is where I think the challenge hasn't really been met is you have to rethink how you work. And that's really hard for most companies. The rethinking of how you work. Like it's really easy to say, we're going to do a video call. That call, we're going to capture it via use of embedded AI, and then it's going to produce a transcript. And guess what? We can now search all the transcripts and we can pick out trends. That's great. That's wonderful. That's not changing how you work, really. It's taking out some of the time, but that's not the big upside. That's helpful, but that's not the big upside. Where people haven't gotten to is when you engineer the things, the way you communicate, like your emails, your internal documents, even the use of email, so that it's engineered, so to speak, to be useful for AI to pick up the key tasks. It's the same in marketing messaging. It's the same in persona you want to have in social media. As you start, we're going to have to engineer how we communicate as humans to fit the way AI interprets that information. Like when I say you don't have to do it, but if you do it, the AI tools become much more effective. But that would change things like email as the specific communications tool where all documents are being exchanged for a corporation. And that's a lot. There's a lot of people where email is their information exchange. And yes, AI can comb through there and pick out documents and make more sense of it. That's great. But if you rethink that, hey, let's not exchange information that way. Let's even construct the information we exchange very specifically. You can really start to AI enable everything you do as a corporation. Now, again, I don't think it's going to be job losses. I think it's going to be, guess what? That's more capacity to focus on higher value skills like revenue generation, target marketing, enhancement of your services to the client, better customer service for the clients. There's a bunch of things you could do to upscale that, again, become accessible as you start to rethink the work.
Yeah, and I think that's also where external partners help and bring that perspective. It's interesting because ModUp as an agency, we are a partner that helps our clients rethink, and a lot of them face the same challenges that you did at Deloitte. Like you're a professional services company, and so your company is providing very necessary professional services to other businesses. And sometimes, maybe not even sometimes, a lot of times when you're inside the company, doing all of the rethinking internally only, you don't have the external lens or the external perspective from partners who have worked across many companies to really unlock that creative problem solving. And that's where those partnerships can be so valuable. Because as you were talking, I was thinking in my head, like internally, we're running AI transformation programs, and we do use a lot of learnings from our clients and the work we do for clients as examples of almost partner with them to pull out the what's possible. And partnerships are becoming so much more important to move faster because it's so easy to get bogged down in the internal politics of it all when you try and lead that change internally. But what I wanted, this is, I'm rambling. That was a great, I mean, one, you hit on something that is, it's just one of the biggest blockers, getting people to recognize and actually move to working fundamentally differently. Because yes, when we talk about adoption, a lot of people are like, yes, I'm using ChatGPT. Check, I've adopted AI. Yeah, I recorded that and it was awesome because I got a summary and emailed it to the client really quickly. But for me, as a CTO who is leading innovation and leading change at our company, what advice would you give change leaders who are sort of hitting this wall on unlocking that creative problem solving to get people to move from I'm doing what I do slightly more efficiently to I'm working fundamentally differently to unlock new possibilities of communicating, engaging, and selling?
So I think, and this was my advice, when I was at Deloitte, is there's two facets to this. Part of it is you've got to understand, the old horses for courses, like what's the right tool for the job? Because as you pointed out, there's lots of available tools that we all like bump into and use on a daily basis. Like I personally probably use on a daily basis three different tools. I'm probably using ChatGPT, Copilot, and Gemini on a daily basis because they each have a slightly different use case for me from an efficiency that I want to achieve. Great. Okay. As you point out, check. I use AI. Each individual coming up with a way to adjust how they work is better, but it's not transformative, is the best way to say it. And so you've got to think of what are the tools that are going to be good for what use cases. And I think there's another, and again, I just saw this Wharton research that shows essentially of all the tools people are using, in fifth place is custom AI for a specific purpose. So custom built AI solution using the tools you can use to build, but a custom solution for a company. That's where the money is. Just to be blunt, like what you for this adoption to really work, it's that you're going to use those other tools, and we'll get back to that in a second, but you're going to build custom solutions that are really bespoke for what your particular unique value advantage is, your secret sauce, as we say. Whatever your secret sauce is, if it's secret and it's sauce, it's got a recipe that it could be enabled in a unique way, should be enabled in a unique way. Almost every company has that. And so commodity tools are good for certain things, but they won't get to the real value. And what you see in this Ward study is sales and marketing are lagging behind in adoption of these tools. And I think that's because the generic standard model is not going to enable or enhance or amplify the secret sauce a lot of companies bring. But get back to the other side of the equation is you really have to think about how people work. This is one of the biggest barriers. So yes, we can all change a little bit of what we do on a daily basis. Like, I'm going to have meeting notes. Okay, that's great. But I'll give you a couple examples I saw that I couldn't get changed when I was with Deloitte. I was trying, and these tools were emerging. And this goes in the talent domain. There's a lot of opportunity to rethink everything you do with talent. Now, HR tends to be a little bit further ahead now in adoption as a department, but a couple of easy examples. Onboarding. This is something I was trying to figure out. How do you figure out what's effective for onboarding for your new team? Because you're going to see in the productivity / ratings reviews, if you will, a variation, a bell curve. That's how it should work. Great. Well, what is it about the people that aren't coming up to speed quickly, and what is it about the people that are coming up to speed quickly? Some of it's personal talent, no doubt, but some of it is likely a pattern of how they interact with the organization, a basic pattern, which you get from how they network. Like, my theory was there are people that are networking better, and it could be because they're better networkers or because they've gotten a place where there's a better network. You pick the idea, but you can use a graph tool, and they're available to try to understand these connections between people in the organization. And you could quickly understand, are my new hires networking in at the same rate, pace, and in the right way? Because networking is a huge exchange of very important information about how a company works, how your department works, how your clients work. Like, that's where you get the real learning. So you can do a bunch of training programs, but watching the network grow. Okay, well, if you change the way you monitor new hires, you might have a very quick process to understand, are they networking and properly, almost a quick remedial review. You could use AI to do that, but you'd have to completely change the theory of onboarding, as opposed to like, how many hours of training did they take? How many classes did they take? That stuff is useful, obviously, but it's not new. And the flip of that is, on ratings is another way to move. You could totally change the way most people are rated and get humans out of almost all of the evaluation, and then also make it more real time and less annual. Yes, everyone's driving towards that, but you get some really interesting patterns once you start to get to numbers above 100 people of how do people rate? Do we have people that are rating differently? Are there people that are struggling? Can you find them earlier and help them? And what are the people? Who are the people that are succeeding? Great, you just found people that succeed. What are they doing differently? You start to get actionable information that can change the way you grow and develop your teams. Okay, but you'd have to change your cycles to not be an annual cycle, which is I'm going to give you a rating to get compensation kind of a model. You want to get to a real-time in and out kind of theory, and then quickly adjust when you find new practices. And that whole thing, dynamic, quickly, and adjusting, that's really difficult in a lot of companies. By the way, I think that's where small to medium businesses are particularly well positioned. They're not as invested usually in these historic processes. They're not as invested usually in archaic, old school software. They're willing to take more chances, and they can adjust faster. So that's why I think when you start to build in that kind of dynamism, is that the right word, into the organization, then you could certainly use off-the-shelf tools, but you would tell everybody, you're going to use this tool for the following purpose, and we're going to change because here's how we're going to adapt or integrate it into our daily working, so to speak. And like, I'll give you a really basic example, and then I'll shut up, I promise, which is PowerPoint drives me nuts. People use PowerPoint as a communications tool. That's not what it's designed for. If you want to write a message, one, it should be short if it's supposed to be like a quick turnaround. If it's, I need to educate you, the only reason you'd use PowerPoint is there's a need to integrate graphics in a flow, and you need to present it. Word or Google Docs, you pick the text-driven engine, is going to be a better answer. So And sometimes you just need to send a chart, which is like, you don't like, your chart should tell you, like, people should read a graph and know what the answer is. They shouldn't have to interpret it. Like, if you're going to communicate information, your analysis should leap off the page. Like, they shouldn't have to be, you shouldn't have to tell them what to look for. Like, that's clear. So it drives me nuts. But you know how ingrained PowerPoint is a communications tool? It's literally insane. So there's hours of time with people converting things into this format to send it to other people when it's not actually intended to ever be presented. So you could outlaw that. Like, I've done that. I've told people, do not bring me any more PowerPoint because that's not what you need for this job. Just write it out. And if you can't write it out, we get a different issue. And if the chart doesn't tell me what it's supposed to tell me, we get a different issue. So there's ways you could change how an organization works, but you got to commit to some uncomfortable decisions like, oh my God, we invested a lot of money in the Microsoft suite. What do we do now? Well, maybe adjust your thinking. Do you need that suite? I don't know. It just gets back to, like, depending on the company, start thinking about what's relevant for what you want to do. But I do think you got to have both sides of that equation. And I'll come back to you, and you have to be willing to listen to both sides of the equation and start adjusting on both sides for this to really transform how a business works.
So I love all of that and what you're saying and the need for transformational change and to think differently. I could hear clients, even internal leaders or really anyone I've worked with, pushing back and saying, that's going to just take too much time. Like, we are doing work right now today and delivering, and who has the time to, one, rethink how this should be done, two, to transform and even put in a process to change? How do you make that argument and tie what's necessary to actually work differently to the goals and the vision and really the financial stability and growth of the company?
And this gets back to your point on partners. And I think this is where a partner is really helpful, because one of the most helpful things is to, one, give people examples of what kind of changes, risks, projects you can take that are really high probability improvements in any organization based on the third party, the partner's experience. Modop's a good example of that. Modop's got a ton of experience of, we're seeing this working, or we've seen this not work. Like this, that's the good news with an organization like Modop that is penetrated or is in a variety of similar style small to medium businesses around the U.S. You've got great experience. You've got great use cases. Now, the theory, though, the third party can look at and I think is willing to look at the strategy of the organization very objectively, and can then turn that into, if this is the strategy, then therefore here are the ways you can enable the strategy. That's the key connection of, see your strategy, here's where we want to go, here's how we've seen it work, here's what we recommend it work. And then the technology is the last component you bring in. And so if this is what the actions we want to take, here's the right technology, not just AI. Here's the right technology for that situation. And then it gets back to, I think there's going to be this growing understanding of, I need a custom solution, not custom as much as I need my own company solution for this specific application. I want to control where my data sits. That's a really, really, really misunderstood or not well respected aspect of using these public tools. You have no control over the data. So you really want to control the data, which you should really want to control the data. You need it to be in a situation where you're controlling exactly how and when and where and what is going in. That's why you need a strategy, and that's why you need governance. And the third party has seen all the problems, and I've seen them as well, so people aren't doing that. There's also going to be bumps along the road of typical obstacles or challenges. And once again, you don't want to discover and solve every one of these on your own. Like, take advantage of the experience of a third party who has seen and then overcome a variety of solutions with a variety of challenges with a variety of solutions. It's going to be clear. And I think to get the organization off the dime, so to speak, I wouldn't recommend it. I haven't seen a lot of upside in like deploying a tool and saying, see what you can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vendors that will sell you, this ChatGPT Enterprise. Let's deploy it and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Google Copilot. Let's deploy that. Let's see what happens. There's two really important points here. That costs money, and like actual money out the door before you understand even how to measure ROI or what ROI is. So it's not remotely free, and it's really debatable what the ROI is going to be unless you've got a deliberate, intentional strategy. Because how are you going to measure it if you don't? And
Mhm.
then the second thing is people's time is also not free. So if you're going to ask people to start experimenting just for the heck of it, think of how many people are going to run the same experiment and end up in the same outcome of it. It wasn't really helpful in this organization to do the following thing, right? So it's fine for people to play around with these tools, but just to deploy them and ask people to go figure out what would be useful will slow down adoption. If you look at what's happening in the big enterprises, they're not having a lot of great ROI because a
Mhm.
lot of them deploy these tools broadly without theories as to what the ROI is going to be, and they're discovering, gee, we're seeing a lot of use, we're generating a lot of costs, but we're not getting what we thought was going to be from a productivity perspective. I think you really have to have a use case dependent or use case specific situation of strategy with this idea of how am I going to govern it, what data am I going to use and where, and then actual monitoring in by specific use case. Like we're going to do the following thing, and it's either a department or it's all of us, whatever the test is going to be. And you have very specific measurement, and then you can come back and adjust. You're not going to get it right the first time. You have to come back and this is useful, this isn't useful. And I think that's where the big change is. You're also that whole process brings people along the journey. So you're going to have a lot of people that think AI is here to take my job. Like that's a natural resistance. Or I don't want to learn another tool. Again, natural resistance. What you want to do is get people clear, like this is how this is going to enhance, amplify, and make you more successful. And to do that, you've got to have really internally specific use cases and change agents that say this really worked. And so they're walking on the hallways or on the Zoom calls telling people this really worked. Like who do your fellow employees believe? They believe their peers. So you want to have wins as you go before you leap into something that is like an all singing, all dancing, expensive pilot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you made a lot of really good points in there that we've seen. One, we are still seeing too many leaders want to grab a hold of the silver bullet. Like, I'm just going to use this one piece of tech. Let's just roll that out really quick. We got to get that check mark. We got to report back to the board that we have X% adoption on AI by this date. Let's, just go. It's there, it's available. And they they want that silver bullet. And we are now seeing the folks who did that have learned from it really quickly and have come to the realization that you highlighted. If you are using the same technology that everyone in the market is using, you are not going to be differentiated in the market. You have to make the leap to rethink the way you deliver value to your clients. And one of the uh, to restate something that you said, like you has to be strategy, it has to be grounded in the challenges, aligned um, to more than just a single person's way of working, is bubbling it all the way up to what have you always wanted to do for your customer? When you think about who you're serving, the customers you have, what have you always wanted to do for them? And that is now possible. And just assume it's possible. But there's not going to be one single application or one tool that's already available on the market that's going to get you there. But when you start imagining what have you always wanted to do, to your point, you can bring more people into that conversation. And then when you create the experience first of what that could look like, then you're going to find that it's actually a combination of some off the shelf tools, some things that we're going to need to connect. You're going to see that data is a problem. Like that is
Yep.
always revealed. We don't have the right data. We have too much data. The data is all in these different sources, but it unlocks that journey while empowering people to be there. But absolutely, it sometimes takes that external voice because we're busy. We're already all busy trying to serve our own customers and clients as large B2B companies. Uh, so I love that answer. I love that perspective of you have to start in a place that brings people together, but the people coming together also have to understand that they are going to be doing their job differently. And that sometimes everyone gets really excited until it's time for themselves to change. And then it's, oh, wait a minute. But I've always done it this way and I've been wildly successful my whole career. And it's like, and you have, and high five. And we're entering a new era.
Well, and the magic here is when you amplify that person's expertise, not replace it. Like everyone's afraid they're going to go away. Well, there's a lot of expertise that people don't even document. They can't document it. They've got it in their head. They've got the supercomputer in their head that is connecting data points. That is pattern recognition. That's the one thing about humans. We're excellent at pattern recognition. So some of the people that best at their job are doing it naturally, and we're not trying to replace that. What you're trying to do is speed it up so they can do it faster. They can be more responsive, or expand it so the scope they can see it across a broader array of situations, again, for their clients, um, and then or themselves. And almost no organization has enough capacity to be building all the expertise again that some of the third parties can bring, like a mod op, because how would you? Like, that's a humongous investment that needs a very clear return. Even if you've got a data analytics team that's in-house, once again, I think if you've got to show that data analytics team, I got 100 more use cases for you. Like, so they're used to very specific ordered analyses that is coming off of data that is in a database that they have, et cetera. Like, like that kind of model is going to change, and you've got to convince them that, well, you're going to join new information that they don't usually join. Usually you don't need all their data. So like oftentimes all of it is too much. You got to make
Right.
sure it's tagged properly. It often isn't tagged properly. You got to know what's rights to it. That's often a problem. So when you're just kind of bumping around in a big database and cranking out queries, and there's a certain level of accuracy, like I think if you get people to understand, like, we can create much clearer, much more precise analyses, but it's assembled in a different way. Then your job is more, you're more effective at your job. It's really what happens. And then you see the patterns more cleanly. You see them more quickly. I was just talking to a consumer packaged goods company. One of the brand managers happened to be a friend, and we're talking about some of the issues that they have. And they've been finding with for years, like, they get the data on the effectiveness of their media annually.
Mm.
How could that possibly work, right?
Right.
And and that so they're literally flying blind for a year. Now, they have great instincts. They get to see how the product's moving. They certainly are looking at volume data. So it's not like I don't want to say that they're not. They're doing quite a good job with the tools they're handed. It's a matter of, there's got to be a faster way. Like, I didn't have an answer for them because it was just a friend and we were having a conversation. But there's got to be a faster way to do this. Like, this doesn't make any sense that the delay would have that kind of a lag to it. And so with the new tools, it could be a smaller sample. It could be a specific sample. It could be you go create the data. This is what a lot of people don't actually aren't thinking, is like, I don't have the data. It's not able, go create it. Like, it could be worth you to go create the data, surveying, interviewing, focus groups. You pick the method of assembly. Like, now you might want to go assemble the data you want to connect to a smaller data set, but it's a much more informative data set. I just think, the opportunities there are going to be phenomenal for most small to medium companies, because of they can get access to and then be much more responsive to, with these tools, what the customers are looking for or need.
Yeah. No, I agree. You should tell your friend that you've now joined an award-winning, multi-award-winning media company. One of the ways that we have that expertise and that we're able to take and pair our data intelligence team with media, with our tech team, is we've grown through acquisition. And we are leaning into acquire the intelligence, acquire that expertise that you're talking about, elevating. And that made us one of the fastest growing independent agencies in the country. AI is changing the way enterprises approach mergers, integrations, and structures today. From your experience, because you also led global M&A consulting at Deloitte, how is that change happening?
So there's two, again, I'm coming up with two on every side here. There's two ways to think about this. Um, One is the enablement of M&A in general. So just like you'd expect with every department, companies should be able to look at many more targets, much much more in depth, in a much more in depth manner than they would have at the time or the energy capacity, et cetera, to do before. So if you're acquisitive, if you're the kind of company that's looking to grow through inorganic acquisition, the opportunities now are enormous around quickly assessing the fit with a target. Finding the targets, and B, assessing fit with the target. Just your ability to find that needle in the haystack, so to speak, with this unique value of combining two organizations has gone up dramatically. So the speed and hit rate are both going to accelerate. So, as a former M&A integration person, it strikes me as we should see a lot more value being created out of M&A, because previously you could only look at a few targets, and a lot of people got committed. They would essentially sign a definitive agreement way before they had the right kind of information, because that's the way it used to work. And in theory, they were going to go work it out. But once you've signed a definitive agreement, almost no one backs out. And so you'd end up with, I call it, less than optimal results. Whereas today, you should be able to get to a much better fit conversation, value creation conversation, because of the data. Now, the other side of this M&A, it enables the transaction, but from how companies are going to grow essentially from mergers and acquisitions. If you want to position your company to be a great target, and if you want to be a great integrator, this gets back to the prior point of restructuring yourself, so to speak, restructuring your work so that it's AI enabled already. So just think about that. The next thing is going to be how enabled is this organization with AI and the way I use AI. So it used to be you'd compare your ERP packages. Hey, do we have the same package? Can we consolidate it? Because that would be a big cost. Typically, in any merger, one of the biggest costs is going to be IT integration. I mean, it almost always was close to the biggest cost, if not the biggest cost. Okay, well, we've got a new kind of IT integration now. It's AI integration. And it's what tools you're using, how much control do you have of the data, how well documented is it? Can I really bring you and your information in quickly to enhance and do what I do well? Or do I have a huge cleanup problem?
Yeah.
And two ways to think about that. You can set yourself up to be both a great integrator. We would advise this to companies anyway, which is structure your domain, so to speak, so that you can integrate companies much more quickly. Essentially, set up your GLs back in the ERP days so that you've got an easier onboarding method for companies, assuming you're going to onboard them to your systems if you're a big acquirer. Companies should think about that. What's your strategy for structuring yourself to be able to bring people on? And what are you looking for? This gets back to your due diligence process. What are you looking for in these targets that would tell you good, bad, or different with respect to AI usage? Now, here's the good news. We're in early days, so you're not going to find a lot of people that are well beyond me. I use ChatGPT, Gemini, or Copilot. But how structured is their data? Where is it housed, and how controlled is it? What are the rights and access that people have? A lot of those things become important because you can have huge messes on your hands. Like that, unfortunately, this is one of those where consultants always tell you, "Oh, be careful because it's a big problem." But there are time bombs out there of people that have dumped client data into the public domain because they're using public tools and or their staff didn't understand it when they used this tool, what was happening. So, this is another risk and liability you got to look out for. There are time bombs waiting to go off of people using AI inappropriately and essentially losing control of their data or their clients' data, confidential data. And so now you have another category of risk to look out for. But I'll look out on the opportunity side. So in the next couple of years, people should be thinking about how am I going to structure myself technically so that I can integrate quickly the best data from these acquisitions and/or the best processes and/or the best tools. Like, what is my method of, let's assume we're all going to be an AI-enabled enterprise. So I think that's an interesting and evolving area that is going to start to become important. Like, if you think about the advancement of technology, back in the day, way before I was born, mainframes were this huge leap from manual. Then people figured out how to fractionalize mainframes. That was a huge leap. That created whole consulting firms, just fractionalizing time sharing on a mainframe. Then you got the distributed computing, client server kind of, which was further democratizing what people could do. You had a whole set of different problems, and then came ERP, and then it was this whole mishmash of who's going to have which ERP program. Each of these created a problem of how do you bring someone on to a new technology. AI is the latest new technology that is going to become integral to corporations. There's no way to stop it. So you're going to have an AI architecture. Everyone should have that in their minds. Today, it sits side by side, or or layered on your current full stack. But you have to have this architecture that is laid out and clear to say this is our theory as to what we're going to do when the data comes in, how we're going to house it, where we're going to store it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think getting ahead of that's a good. If you want to be acquisitive, having a real clear perspective on that is going to both help on the integration front, but also help you on the targeting front, better understanding how much it's going to cost, better understanding how quickly you can get to value. Also, it's a great story. If you want to bring a company on and you've got here's how we're going to amplify what you do. If you've got your act together, they're going to be pretty happy that you see the value in them, and they'll be much more likely to be, call it, interested in being acquired or partnering, merging.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's definitely been a big selling point for the agencies that we bring on. And you
Right.
absolutely nailed the reason why, which is we are democratizing the ability to do things that you haven't been able to do before. And like you said, it introduces new challenges, which means underneath all of the planning, all of the strategy, aligning to show your team what's possible and being able to deliver on it, you have reskilling, upskilling, and training programs because new challenges are emerging, new roles are emerging. And we see a lot of companies doing layoffs and saying it's quote unquote because of AI. Okay, it's really things that were less thinking and highly repeatable are going away. But that doesn't mean that there aren't new opportunities emerging. And if, that requires changing the way you fundamentally work. So John, honestly, we could talk about this all day, but we've gone over time. This has been so rich with clear insights on how people can start thinking about really transforming their business underneath that equation for growth and new opportunities to deliver value. And yes, it takes work and maybe it requires a partner, but the benefits are going to be huge. New opportunities, new roles, new ways to serve your clients and drive revenue. So thank you so much for sharing all this experience. It's been a great conversation. If folks want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
John.powers@modop.com.
Yes, absolutely. And John is also on LinkedIn, and we'll have to do a continuation of this soon. If you want to hear more episodes of Leader Generation, we're always interviewing clients and other ModOp thought leaders inside the business on helping people realize growth and revenue from digital transformation. Those episodes are at modop.com. Until next time, John, have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Tessa.